For your ears only, we have more major moments from our Newsweek On Air Voices of the Century project. I'm David Alpern with a key quote from last week's news. If we move fast, even if imperfectly, that could mean the difference between 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 deaths versus hundreds of thousands or even a million. That was President Obama at the UN, urging other nations to supplement U.S. efforts against Ebola in West Africa with air transportation, medical evacuation, doctors, and medical supplies. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said contribution from member states are falling well short of the 20-fold surge required. He proposed a new quick response UN Health Corps. Now more talk of war and peace from our December 26, 1999 Newsweek On Air show with co-host Warren Levinson of AP.
We of the Kennedy and Johnson administrations, those of us who participated in the decisions on Vietnam, we acted according to what we thought were the principles and the traditions of our country. And we made our decisions in the light of those values. But we were wrong. We were terribly wrong.
Former Secretary of Defense Robert S. McNamara on Newsweek On Air in April 1995, the first broadcast interview about his mea culpa memoir of the Vietnam War. We spoke with him again last week and asked about the controversial Tonkin Gulf incident that began U.S. escalation in Vietnam.
My first thought was that it was unbelievable. And in a sense, I was half right, because the second attack, we now know from a meeting I had with General Giap in Hanoi, the second attack, which we believed had happened, did not happen. But I thought it was unbelievable because it appeared to us that Hanoi, the leaders of North Vietnam, were making a clear decision to escalate the war. It now turns out that that was not the case. The decision was made by a local commander. We totally misinterpreted what happened, in the sense that we believed there had been two attacks. It's now clear there was only one, and it's now clear that that one attack was not directed or dictated by the commanders from Hanoi, but rather by a local commander.
When you think today of the role of the Vietnam War in American policy, what role do you think it plays?
It plays an ambiguous role, and George Shultz, in commenting on it a couple of years ago, said it was very important not to learn the wrong lesson from Vietnam. And by that he simply meant that Cap Weinberger, the Secretary of Defense, while George was Secretary of State, had in a sense concluded we should never accompany U.S. diplomatic moves by the use of military force or threat of the use of military force, other than in situations comparable to, I'll say, World War II. It's the combination of military force or threats of military force and diplomacy in situations such as we have in Bosnia today should be excluded from U.S. foreign policy. George Shultz said that was the wrong lesson. I very much agree with George.
The title of your upcoming book, Argument Without End, suggests there are still lessons we can learn from the Vietnam experience.
There are several that apply today. One of them is, don't ever apply U.S. military, economic, or political power unilaterally, except in the narrow case of defending the continental U.S. In Vietnam, we did, in a very real sense, apply our power unilaterally. The French wouldn't go along, the Germans wouldn't go along, the Japanese wouldn't go along, the British wouldn't go along. We're not omniscient. We acted as though we thought we were. And when we've applied U.S. power unilaterally, we frequently make mistakes. That's one lesson.
And do you see the Vietnam War still having an effect on our domestic life today?
I think it has had a clear disruptive effect, although that is gradually weakening. And I think that this new book, as a matter of fact, is designed to further weaken it, to show the mistakes we made and how to avoid them in the future, but also to show that the North Vietnamese made mistakes, and we can learn from that, and they can learn from that. One of the mistakes we both made was to misunderstand our opponent, and that is a mistake we run the risk of making in the future. We don't understand Iraq the way we should. We don't understand Muslim fundamentalism the way we should. We must understand our opponents better than we did in Vietnam. And our opponents, by the way, must understand us much, much better than the North Vietnamese made. They made as many mistakes as we did.
Robert McNamara's new book, Argument Without End, will be introduced next month at Brown University. A turning point at the end of the Cold War was Ronald Reagan's Berlin Wall speech in 1987. Peter Robinson, who wrote it, recalls being told, whatever you do, don't mention the wall. So what to write about? He explored that question at a Berlin dinner party with English-speaking Germans.
And we chatted. we chatted about a number of things, but at one point I said, look, I just have to ask. I have been told by the American diplomat here in Berlin that the President of the United States, when he comes here, ought not to mention the Berlin Wall because you've all just gotten used to it. I flew over the wall earlier today. I have to say it's hard for me to believe anyone could ever get used to it. Could you just tell me how you feel about that wall? And there was a moment's silence. I thought I had made some kind of terrible faux pas, but in fact it was a silence in which they were gathering themselves, so to speak, and deciding who would go first. And one man spoke up, breaking the silence, and he pointed off in one direction, and he said, my sister lives 16 miles in that direction. I haven't seen her in more than 20 years. How do you think I feel about that wall? Another fellow said, I walk to work following the same path every day, and every day the same young man looks down at me with binoculars from the guard tower, and one of us is a zookeeper and the other is a monkey, and I've never known who was who. And then my hostess, the woman who had put on the dinner party, she was quite angry, and she made a fist of one hand and slapped it into the palm of the other, and she said, if this man Gorbachev is serious about this glasnost and this perestroika, he can prove it by coming here, and he can prove it by taking down this wall. Well, that was it. That was the moment. It was very clear that any accommodation Berliners had made to that wall was a surface accommodation. You didn't talk about it every day, perhaps, because it would drive you crazy if you did. But they hated it deep within themselves. They hated it every day of their lives. And when my hostess said, if Gorbachev is serious, he can prove it by taking down the wall, it was, if you're writing for Ronald Reagan, you know material when you've got it.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
I wrote those words. That is true. I couldn't have written them for anyone else, nor would anyone else have delivered them. That speech belongs to Ronald Reagan.
Former Reagan speechwriter Peter Robinson, now at the Hoover Institution. Sadly, the end of the Cold War has not meant peace in our time, as victims of bloody conflicts in Africa, the Middle East, and the Balkans can testify. Back in February of 1994, we spoke with Zlata Philipovic, age 12, and the author of a moving memoir called Zlata's Diary, A Child's Life in Sarajevo.
Those days, I think it was terrible. We didn't have water, we didn't have food. It was really big shooting, shelling. I didn't eat for maybe 1-2 days anything hot. So I don't know, I wanted to tell to somebody, stop this or I will kill myself. But like somebody will hear me and stop that war.
Zlata Philipovic, author of Zlata's Diary, A Child's Life in Sarajevo. She spoke on Newsweek On Air in 1994 and became part of our 1999 Voices of the Century project. Now this quote from last week's news. We have every right to knock at this door. That was Ukraine President Petro Poroshenko on the prospect of membership in the European Union. His office also revealed plans to repeal a law that prevents Ukraine from joining NATO, sure to be even more provocative to neighboring Russia, which last week signed an energy deal to help Kiev, at least on paper. Next, some entertainment voices of the century, for your ears only.